You're not even really family. My sister yelled at me during dinner, so I stood up and said, cool. Then stop asking me for money, and walked out. That night, my phone blew up. You're not even really family. My sister shouted, slamming her wine glass on the table so hard I thought it might shatter. The words didn't sting like she wanted them to. No, what stung was that no one at the table said a thing. Not mom, not dad, not even Uncle Kenny, who is usually good for at least a half-hearted come on now when things got heated. That night, I had just finished saying calmly, gently, that I wasn't comfortable co-signing another loan. She had some genius idea about starting an online boutique selling imported jewelry. I asked a couple of questions about overhead, suppliers, logistics. She waved me off. It's all under control, she said, which in Emily speak meant she'd read half a blog post about passive income. I looked at her from across the table. And maybe I smirked. I won't pretend I didn't, but I was tired. Tired of working 60-hour weeks just to keep her kids in sneakers and her lights on while she flitted from one crisis to the next. I was never mean about it. I just asked if maybe this time she could figure it out without my signature attached. And that's when she exploded. You're not even really family. It hung in the air like a foul stench. I think the kids even stopped chewing for a second. I just stared at her, then pushed back my chair slowly. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't rush it. I stood up, buttoned my blazer. It was a casual dinner, but I always dressed like someone who knew what boundaries felt like, and said, cool. Then stop asking me for money. I walked out. No yelling, no slamming, just quiet, deliberate footsteps. The silence was louder than her outburst. And in that moment, something broke. Something that had been straining for years. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I would play the role of their safety net, their punching bag, their bank. That was the moment I stopped apologizing for existing on the wrong side of their bloodline. And that was just the beginning. I drove home in silence, hands gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. You don't get angry when it's the 100th cut. You just bleed quieter. My phone started buzzing before I even made it to the on-ramp. First it was my mom, then Emily, then my dad, who couldn't be bothered to look up from his plate 5 minutes ago but now suddenly had a lot to say. I didn't answer. Not a single call. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and scrolled through the messages like I was reading a script I'd already memorized. Emily, you didn't have to embarrass me in front of everyone. The kids saw that. Mom, Tom, please. She's just stressed. You know how hard it is for her. Dad, she apologized, sort of. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk. That last one made me laugh. Apologize sort of, that's the family motto, isn't it? But what really set me off wasn't the yelling or the guilt trips. It was the sense of entitlement. The complete absence of accountability. No one said, thank you for the years I helped. No one acknowledged the fact that I paid Emily's rent for 2 years straight, that I covered mom's utilities when the furnace went out last winter, or that I've been quietly paying the monthly installments on dad's car even though it's registered in his name. I don't think they even know how much I've given. Not really. They just assume I'll always do it because I always have, until tonight. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to stop helping. I was going to make it known. I opened up my laptop, logged into my bank, and began shutting it all down like lights in an empty house. One by one, Emily's automatic rent payment, gone. Her phone plan, cancelled, let her explain that one to Verizon. The shared Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus accounts, logged out and passwords changed. Dad's car payment, cancelled. Good luck with that next billing cycle. And then I opened a spreadsheet. It took hours. I scoured bank statements, old receipts, text messages, every transaction, every Venmo, every can I just borrow $200 till Friday since 2017. By the end, the total was just north of $38,000. That's when the anger finally came, because it wasn't just about money. It was the gaslighting. The way they made me feel guilty for not giving enough while giving nothing in return. The way my sister weaponized bloodlines when it suited her but never stopped cashing the checks. They never called me half-brother but they needed something. Only when I said no. So I took a screenshot of the final total, added a few notes next to some line items, Emily's Hawaii trip, June 2022 just in case anyone forgot, and then I opened the family group chat. It was just after 2 a.m. when I hit send. The group chat had been quiet for an hour or so, probably everyone asleep, still digesting whatever casserole mom made for the family dinner. But I didn't care. I wasn't writing this for their convenience. I was writing it for me. Tom here. Since Emily made it clear tonight that I'm not even really family, I'd like to share what I've contributed as a non-family member. Attached is a detailed record of every payment I've made to help support this family over the last 7 years, $38,412.60 to be exact. Rent, utilities, groceries, car payments, school supplies, emergency dentist visits, phone bills, bailouts, literal and metaphorical. If I'm not family, then stop treating me like your bank. Effective immediately, all financial support ends. Good luck. Tom. Then I attached the spreadsheet, the whole thing, line by line, receipts, references, screenshots, anything I could find. 5 minutes later, the group chat lit up like a Christmas tree in July. Mom, Tom, this is not the way to handle things. We need to talk. Please don't do this. Emily, you actually kept a spreadsheet? Are you serious? What kind of person does that? Dad, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. This is petty, Tom. You're better than this. I stared at the screen, dry-eyed, calm. For once in my life, I wasn't anxious or second-guessing myself. I wasn't twisting myself into a pretzel to keep everyone happy. I was done. So I sent one more message. Tom here. Boundaries aren't petty. You made it clear I don't belong. Now I'm just acting accordingly. I wish you well. Goodbye. And then, one by one, I blocked them. Mom, Dad, Emily, even Uncle Kenny, who I always thought might have had my back but never once spoke up. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in years. I closed my laptop, poured one last drink, and opened a new browser tab. It was time to spend the money I would have wasted on them this month. And oh, did I have plans? By 3 a.m., I was booking a trip to British Columbia. Not the typical revenge vacation, I know, but I didn't want tropical drinks or Instagram beaches. I wanted silence, pines, cold air, a cabin where no one knew my name or needed a favor, where no one would look at me like I owed them something for being born slightly outside their DNA hierarchy. I found this off-grid lodge just outside of town with a wood-burning stove, hiking trails, and no Wi-Fi. Perfect. I paid for the whole week in full, clicked confirm, and just stared at the screen for a moment. It was the first time I'd spent real money on myself in years, not a work expense, not a family emergency, just me. I didn't even feel guilty. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed messages on my secondary email account. The one I'd forgotten was still synced with the old group calendar we used for family birthdays. Apparently, Emily had tried to rally the troops. The subject lines were telling. Urgent, Tom needs to come to his senses. How to confront financial abuse. Can we sue him? One of the emails, sent by Dad, oddly had the nerve to say, I don't know what kind of man keeps receipts on his own family. That's not love. That's control. I read it twice, let out a dry laugh, and then deleted the account entirely. They could scream into the void all they wanted. I wasn't listening anymore. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a decade. I took myself out to dinner, a real one. No coupons, no watching the check like it might grow teeth. Just a quiet place with dim lighting, a good steak, and a bottle of red that didn't have a screw top. The waiter smiled at me when he brought the check. You celebrating something? He asked. I paused, then smiled back and said, yeah, a fresh start. I figured the blowback would die down after a few days. I was wrong. Cutting someone off financially is one thing, cutting off the illusion of obligation, that sends people spinning. I didn't hear from them directly, of course. I had blocked every number, email, and backup account I could think of, but mutuals started surfacing like mushrooms after rain. Friends of the family, distant cousins I hadn't seen since the 3rd grade, even my old high school English teacher messaged me on LinkedIn, of all places, to say my mom was deeply hurt. Apparently, Emily had gone full PR crisis mode. She told everyone I'd abandoned the family in a time of need, made herself sound like a single mother wronged by her greedy half-brother. My dad backed her, of course. He'd always been good at rewriting history to fit his version of events. I imagine it went something like this. Tom's always been distant. We've tried so hard. He just changed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had changed. What they didn't expect was that the people I did still talk to, my coworkers, my actual friends, even my therapist, knew better. They'd heard the stories over the years. They knew how many emergencies I'd paid for that somehow always aligned with Emily's shopping sprees or her husband's investments. One of my colleagues, Jess, left a bag of pastries on my desk with a note. Saw your spreadsheet. Savage. Proud of you. She wasn't even kidding. The story had somehow made the rounds at work. I didn't mind. For once, I wasn't embarrassed by the family drama. I was free of it. And here's the funny part. After the group chat message went viral among the extended family, 2 of my cousins quietly reached out and said they'd been loaning Emily money, too. I guess I wasn't the only bank she'd been robbing with a smile. 3 days before my trip, I got a message on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize at first, Marcy Bennett, one of Emily's old college friends. We met once at some birthday thing years ago but hadn't spoken since. Her message was short. Hey, I saw your post. Just wanted you to know you're not crazy. Emily's been doing this for years. To everyone. That piqued my curiosity. I replied, not surprised. But what do you mean exactly? What she sent me next was enlightening. Screenshots, voice notes, a PDF of old texts, Emily asking to borrow $1,000 to get her kids out of a dangerous daycare. That was the jewelry supplier trip. Another friend who wired her $500 when she claimed her youngest needed surgery, only to later see Instagram stories of her at a spa weekend. Emily didn't just milk the family, she bled dry anyone who still believed she was the same sweet girl from their college days. Suddenly, the spreadsheet I'd built felt like a chapter in a much bigger book. And for the first time in my life, I realized something important. It had never been about me. Not really. She wasn't cruel to me because I was her half-brother. She was cruel because that's who she was. That you're not even really family line, that wasn't a moment of truth. It was a line she thought would hurt the most. And she wasn't alone. My parents had been just as complicit. Their silence at the dinner table wasn't confusion, it was compliance. They were used to it, comfortable in the pattern. I had just been the only one dumb enough or maybe loyal enough to stay in it for as long as I did. But not anymore. Not after this. Not after all the stories started rolling in. Not after I realized how many people had been in my exact shoes, wondering if they were selfish for finally saying no. The day before my trip, I mailed 3 letters, yes, actual letters, typed, printed, signed, old school, one to my parents, one to Emily, and one to my lawyer. The first 2 were simple, no threats, no accusations, no dramatics, just closure. Dear Mom and Dad, I understand now that your love came with fine print. I spent a long time trying to earn a seat at a table where my chair was always missing a leg. I won't do it anymore. I wish you peace. But I'm done. Tom. Dear Emily, you win. I'm out. You get the last word, you always do. But from now on, I don't hear it. Don't call me. Don't message me. Don't send someone else to do it either. We're square now. All debts settled. Take care of your kids. T. The third letter, to my lawyer, was less poetic and more functional. He had all the documentation now, every receipt, every message, every time I co-signed a loan she never paid back. I wasn't planning to sue, not unless she tried something really stupid. But it never hurts to be ready. After that, I packed light, a single duffel bag, a hiking journal, a paperback I never seemed to finish, and my phone set to airplane mode for the foreseeable future. That night, I stood in my apartment and looked around at the stillness. No dings, no pings, no group chats or emergencies, just silence. I smiled. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. The flight to Alberta was early, too early for regrets. I left before sunrise, before the city started humming, and before anyone could change my mind. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even the people I still talk to. Not out of spite, but because I wanted this to be mine, a quiet departure from a loud life. When I got off the plane and felt the cold mountain air hit my face, I swear it did more for my lungs than years of deep breathing ever had. The cabin was small, nestled among towering trees and wrapped in mist like something out of a novel. No TV, no internet, just firewood, soft blankets, and a view that made me forget everything with a single glance. I didn't even unpack fully. I left the bag by the door and went straight outside. I walked trails for hours that day. No headphones, no music, just the sound of my boots against dirt and the wind threading its way through pine branches like it had something to say. Final update. You're not even really family. My sister yelled at me during dinner, so I stood up and said, cool. Then stop asking me for money, and walked out. That night, my phone blew up. Somewhere along mile 5, it hit me, not just the realization that I had been carrying everyone else's weight for years, but that I had allowed it. Every bailout, every favor, every just this once I had said yes, not out of generosity, but guilt. Guilt for being the half-sibling. Guilt for having a steady job. Guilt because when you grow up in a family that praises you for fixing everything, you start to believe your worth is tied to how quickly you can patch the holes in other people's lives. I wasn't noble, I was afraid. Afraid that if I didn't say yes, they'd stop pretending I belong. But they did anyway. And the funny thing, once they said the quiet part out loud, that I wasn't really family, I realized how long I'd been hearing it in their tone, their eyes, the way they passed over me in conversation like I was the help at their private table. They wanted my wallet, not my presence, my silence, not my support. And I had given it to them again and again, hoping one day I'd finally be in. But I was never in. Not once. And out here, far from their voices, I finally understood that it wasn't my job to fix their mess. That night by the fireplace, I cracked open my journal and wrote 2 words, start over. Not with a new job, not with new friends, with me. I wrote down everything I put off because of them, the trips I never took, the classes I never enrolled in, the hobbies I dropped when Emily's emergencies ate up my budget. Photography. That was one. There was a time when I wanted to shoot weddings, landscapes, people, and stolen moments of joy and grief, real moments. I bought my first camera with my first paycheck and sold it 5 years later to help pay for Emily's car repairs. So the next morning, I went into the tiny town below the mountain and bought a camera. Not top of the line, but good enough. The kind that would have made 22-year-old me tear up. And for the next 4 days, I photographed everything. The snow on the roof of the cabin, the frost on a leaf at dawn, an elderly couple holding hands on a frozen bridge. Every shot a kind of reclamation, every shutter click another stitch in the part of me I'd left undone. By the time I left, I felt heavier in the best way, full, settled. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission to live on my own terms. On the plane home, I turned my phone back on. There were messages, some new numbers, some old ghosts trying again. I didn't read them. Instead, I took a picture out the window, the clouds, the sun melting the horizon, the tiny shadow of the wing like a finger pointing forward. Then I turned the phone off again. Some things can wait. When I got back from the mountains, the city felt smaller. Not literally, of course, same skyline, same traffic, same rhythm of people marching around like they're late for something important. But something in me had shifted. Like I'd zoomed out just enough to see how much of my life had been built like scaffolding, temporary supports for people who never intended to build anything of their own. The first real change I made was simple. I changed my number. Not a block list, not a mute or a filter, a clean break. That new string of digits felt like a lock on the front door of my peace. It was one of those subtle things no one really sees, but I felt it. No more late night guilt calls, no more just a quick ask voice messages, no more pretending I was okay being the responsible one and the disposable one. And then came the hard part, the quiet days. Because here's the thing about walking away from dysfunction, the silence that follows. It isn't peace right away, it's withdrawal. At first, I kept catching myself in little habits, holding my breath when the phone buzzed, checking my bank account half expecting some new drain, drafting texts I'd never send just to say one more thing. That voice in my head, the one they planted years ago, it said, you're being dramatic. You're overreacting. Families fight. Families forgive. But here's the truth I had to sit with, families also exploit. And if no one in the room is willing to name that, then walking out is the healthiest thing you can do. So instead of sending a text, I started therapy again, weekly sessions, no skipping. I told my therapist everything, how Emily had turned help into a full-time job, how mom weaponized sympathy, how dad perfected indifference, how I learned to read the emotional weather in a room before I even took my coat off. She said something that stuck with me, you weren't the problem, Tom. You were the utility. It wasn't that they hated me, it's that I had a function. And once I stopped functioning the way they wanted, the illusion broke. That thought gave me permission to begin something I never thought I'd be brave enough to do, build my own version of family. I reached out to a couple of old college friends I'd fallen out of touch with. Not out of drama, just life and distance and the slow fade that happens when you're always on call for someone else's disasters. To my surprise, they welcomed me back without hesitation. About time, one of them said when I invited him over for a quiet dinner at my place. "We miss you. Thought you joined a cult or something." I laughed harder than I had in months. I started going out more. Not clubbing or anything wild, just living. Farmers markets, open mic nights, Saturday morning hikes with no destination. I bought a used bike, took a ceramics class, started photographing strangers in the park again, with their permission this time. One Saturday, I sat on a bench with my camera in my lap and watched a little boy run circles around his dad, laughing like his lungs had no limits. His father just stood there, smiling, hands in his pockets, present, not distracted, not irritated, just there. And something clicked in my chest. I want that. Not necessarily the kid, not necessarily the white picket fence thing, but the presence, the ease, the kind of relationship where you don't have to prove your worth every time someone gets upset. Where family means mutuality, not martyrdom. It wasn't long after that I had dinner with my cousin Jake, the only other person from that side of the family who messaged me after everything went down. We met at a quiet Mexican place we used to go to as kids. He didn't ask for explanations, just nodded, took a bite of his enchilada, and said, "You know, I always wondered how you put up with them." Thought maybe I was the only one who saw it. "Nope," I said, smiling. "You just got out early." He raised his glass. "Here's to staying out." I clinked it without hesitation. And that's the funny part about burning bridges. Sometimes they light the path forward better than the one you were standing on.